personally, tend to be a procrastinator, so I really do well under pressure. That is like where I really thrive, and I love the pressure and like of harvest and making those fast decisions and really like thinking on your like on the fly and having you always inevitably have to make some kind of last minute decisions and changes, and I really love the thrill of it. I think the most stressful time is when we're blending. I mean, we were just blending a little bit this morning, and it's like you can't, once you put the wine together, you can't uncouple the lots. Like that's it. That is done. So you really want, and I'm such a perfectionist. So, it's like, okay, well, like, and such small additions or subtractions from a wine can make an entire difference of the whole profile. So I think that's probably like the most stressful time for me. Like, but harvest, like I thrive in chaos. Like I love the chaos of harvest.
All right, welcome everybody back to the Barrels and Roots podcast. I have a really awesome guest with me today. Would you like to tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do?
Yes, I am Maya Dalla Valle, and I help run and make wine for our family estate, Dalla Valle Vineyards, here in the Napa Valley.
That's awesome. Now, I know that you kind of grew up around wine, but how did you then get into it yourself and find this passion for winemaking?
I think, for me, it was too obvious of a path. So I really felt the need to go out and try to see, what else is out there, having, grown up in the Valley and around wine. So it wasn't really a direct path. I went to University of Washington for international relations, and my my original dream was to become a diplomat. And then that was derailed by the recession and no jobs being available. So, you can always find a job in wine. Wine gets produced no matter what kind of, economic situation we're in. So I worked my first harvest in 2009, and not here, at another winery, Nyers Vineyards. And I fell in love with the whole process of winemaking. And that's how my real, career in wine started.
And that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you're right. I'm still fascinated by, so my wife is a singer, and we fly back and forth for her different shows. And she's been in music a long time. And we were flying back to Atlanta from Southeast Asia. And when you go to the West Coast, you fly east. You fly through
Mhm.
Japan or Taiwan. But when you go to the East Coast, generally you'll fly west. So we went through the Middle East, up over Europe, and then down into it. And it was wild because as we were flying across the Middle East, I looked down and I saw the town of Muscat, and I was just like, ooh, you think
Yeah.
about these places that like wine has been around for thousands of years, and this unbroken tradition for such a long time. It's amazing to think about that.
I know. It is really wild when you think about it. So, like, nowadays when people talk about the wine industry in a type of crisis, I think you have to think a big picture, right? We've been
Mhm.
drinking and consuming and producing wine for thousands of years. It's not going to suddenly stop in one given year.
I completely agree, and I know that companies are facing challenges right now, but like wine has been around for so long that I think that it's about finding ways to balance. I don't know, just to find balance, because eh, there's so many great stories growing up in the Napa Valley as well. There's so many great stories in these wineries. There are so many um, amazing people that are in this industry. But I wanted to ask you that, like, you grew up around it and you went these other directions. But I mean, um, w- what was it about wine that really popped as being something special to you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I think, you look at wine is at the base of it is an agricultural product,
Right.
but it is also so much more in the way that it's unique from other beverages in which, we only produce one wine per year, one vintage, you get one shot at it. And you work the whole season in the vineyard leading up to it. And what you put in the bottle, it really tells a story of a place and time in history. So, I recently had the great opportunity to try a bottle of 1911 Chateau Latour, and
Oh
it
man,
was really astounding. And just like thinking about how it was
that's
even
wild.
produced, over 100 years ago, and how incredible it is just to be able to taste that piece of history. There's really no other product like it. And I think people forget about how special wine is for those reasons. And in the same tasting, we had a bottle of 1945 Chateau Lafite. And that's a wartime wine. So you're thinking about
Wow.
1945, World War II. No one was really available to tend to the vineyards. There wasn't
Right.
even really sulfur available because they were using sulfur to treat the wounds of soldiers. So you think, and then you taste this wine, it's incredible. And to be able to taste like a piece of that living history, because wine is such a living thing, is really a unique experience. And I think that's only one of the many reasons of what makes wine incredibly special.
That's wild, first of all. Like
Yeah,
to be that
I
that's
know.
wild.
On
Um
a Wednesday night, no less.
yeah, that's wild. I remember reading this story in the news once about I think it was like a storage container or something, like, like they found this batch of film, like all of this old like photography film that had
Hmm.
never been developed.
Wow.
And someone bought all this, and like this storage center, and they were like, well, what are we going to do with this? We throw it out? And the person luckily was like, let's get it all developed. And they paid to have it all developed, and it was this wild. And the person who had this film, they didn't know who it was from, but this person had been everywhere. Like, it was all of these wild events that this person had been showing up to. And they were like, this person was like photos of like in the middle of the civil rights movement. This person had been in all of these different cultural events and
Wow.
places, was just showing up. And like, it was wild because each one of those little films, and I love film photography.
Yeah, me
Absolutely love
too.
it. Right. And like you take it, and one of the things that's wild about it, there's two things. First of all, you have this little cartridge that holds all of this information from this one place and moment in time. And you think about like that, like when the light that is bouncing off of a person's face comes through the camera and hits this piece of celluloid, and then it stores that moment. It's wild like that. It's
Yeah.
this time and place captured. And the
Hmm.
the beauty is that wine is exactly the same thing. It's time and place captured in a liquid. And the 1945 wine. I mean, think about that. Like, the world is in massive upheaval. Europe
Yeah.
was just devastated, and yet
Yeah.
someone was like, "Well, we got to
We
keep
got to
still
make
making wine.
wine.
We got to make wine," which is awesome.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh
Yeah,
man.
it's really
Well,
special.
you're right. Your parents planted Maya's vineyard right after you were born. What goes
Hmm.
through your head when you walk through a vineyard that literally has your name on it, you know?
I try not to think too deeply about it. Becomes like a weird, level of inception. But
As I was like wondering,
I think from a broader picture standpoint, obviously, like day to day, I don't really think about it. I separate it in my mind, but if I were to sit down and really think deeply about it, it's what an honor really to be able to not only have a vineyard that's named after you, but also a wine by the same name, and like the one of the most heralded wines from our estate, and to be able to now guide both the farming and make it the wine is incredibly special. Obviously it added layers of pressure because I also want it to continue to be a great wine. So you really can't, slack off, but it definitely holds a certain level of, respect and accountability from my end.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
There's a couple things there, like, um, one of the cool things, like, you're out there, and one of the things that fascinates me for people in the wine industry, you have the two sides, and everyone sees the very fancy side, like the
Glamour.
polish, the glamour, and like they don't
Yeah.
see, the waking up really early to get out in the vineyards, the crazy, the cold weather, the rainy weather in winter in the Napa Valley, and the serious heat in the summer, and people are out there in the vineyards doing it.
Yeah.
What part of it do you enjoy, or you wish people knew more about in the winemaking process?
I mean, the whole process is just, I mean, you really have to, it is definitely, I would say, a profession of passion. It's not for the faint of heart, and you can't feel lukewarm about growing grapes and making wine. But I just love, how every day is really different, and you
Yeah,
follow the seasons, and you're really in touch with seasonality. We look at weather constantly, and rainfall and heat and et cetera. But I think it's such a hands-on project. Like the more that you are in the vineyard, and the more hands-on you are, and the more you're thinking about, you know, every every decision that you make, and how that translates into the wine that you then later produce, it's really impactful, and it makes you really take pride in what you do, and work with integrity. So, for instance, right now we're pruning, and that's probably one of the most important decisions of the year you can make in the farming, because in for the growing season, because not only are you impacting this year's crop, but you're also impacting what's going to be the decision, and what's going to the crop's going to be like for the following year. So you're really making like 2 years worth of decisions in one action of just pruning, and it just goes on from there. But I think people don't realize like the level of skill that in knowledge that it takes, to have a team that has that kind of
yeah,
ability and skill to assess vine by vine, and say like, I'm going to make a cut here and leave it, just 8 buds on this cane. And then, or if this is like, I can make an assessment. This is a weaker vine, and I want to like help it for the next year. So I'm going to prune it, a little bit more conservatively, or like this is a stronger vine. So what can I do to, make it control the vigor a little bit? And just really doing that for each individual vine, like throughout the property. And we have 20 acres, and do that in like a pretty efficient and quick manner. That takes a lot of skill. So we're fortunate to be able to work with such a skilled crew and team, because I couldn't do it by myself. There's no way.
right. That's great. I love the two things there. First of all, the team side is awesome. Having a great team makes everything function better.
Yeah.
My
It's the
team, we're
only
doing
way.
right, the only way. I have,
Yeah.
multiple podcasts, lots of video brands that I do for my own like team, like my own family, but we also, like, I have a bunch of client work, and without my team, it would be tough. It would be impossible. You just can't do it without a great
Impossible.
team.
No,
Impossible. You
no.
know,
I
and like
feel like it's like they're everything, and they're only,
100%.
as good as what you put together, and like what you put in front of your team as like tasks to like, these are the goals, and like this is, you have to take pride in it too.
Yeah, I got everyone team hats yesterday, and I found literally the most obnoxiously awesome trucker hats that I had our team printed on, and they were just,
Yeah.
everyone's like, "These are the most ugly hats that I've ever seen." I was like, "But they're brilliant, right? You guys like them?" And everyone's like, "Yeah, I'm never gonna take this off."
Uh,
So it was awesome. But
That's good.
also right? Also there, you said something else that I thought was really interesting, and the decision that you make now has all these repercussions. I shot 3 music videos for my wife yesterday. It was a bit much. It was like, yeah, she's like, "I've got an idea," and I was just like, when I hear that, I'm like, "Oh god, oh no, not another idea," and so we were like, were there, we were filming, but, like, when I set my camera, like, one tiny little setting that I change can have a dramatic repercussion in how the video looks and how things turn out. And, and this is, like, what I loved, this is digital, so I get a chance to go again, but you can never do a moment again, you know? You never get
Yeah.
a year again, you never get to go back. What was it? A mulligan or something like they have in golf. I want to do that again. We don't get that in life, you know? You have one chance to get it right, and it's high stakes, you know? When you imagine, there's one thing that I would never wanna do. I've done video production a long time, and I know there are some guys and friends that I have that, like, make a lot of money doing, like, weddings, and I was like, "No, I never have ever wanted to do weddings," because there's, like, the couple goes to kiss, and, like, you gotta be there getting that shot, and then,
Yeah.
like, you mess up, "Hang on, excuse me, we weren't rolling then. Can you do the whole thing?" Can you
Yeah.
imagine that? You know,
No.
it's like you can't. There's no do-overs. And is that pressure ever really stressful when you're making wine? Like that, if you slip up, you know. Someone told me like you can't. What was it? Bad grapes. I forget how it goes, but like you can mess up wine, and that pressure, is it ever a challenge?
I mean, of course, there's always challenges. Every decision is, yeah, very important. But I think, I tend to be a procrastinator, so I really do well under pressure. That is like where I really thrive, and I love the pressure and like of harvest and making those fast decisions and really like thinking on your like on the fly and having you always inevitably have to make some kind of last minute decisions and changes, and I really really love the thrill of it. I think the most stressful time is when we're blending. I mean, we were just blending a little bit this morning, and it's like you can't, once you put the wine together, you can't uncouple the lots. Like that's it. That is done. So you really want, and I'm such a perfectionist. So, it's like, okay, well, like, and such small additions or subtractions from a wine can make an entire difference of the whole profile. So I think that's probably like the most stressful time for me. Like, but harvest, like I thrive in chaos. Like I love the chaos of
Yeah,
harvest.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love it. I think that some of the best. I'm one of those people as well. Like when the pressure ramps up, I'm just like, nice. It is time to rock and roll. And like when it slows down are the days that I'm just like stressed out. Um, but I love that the being a perfectionist. I think that people don't. I think we don't have enough people that are perfectionists these days because I think I don't know. I just I see a lot of things that are done halfway. And
Mm,
I don't know. I think that for me, if you're going to be doing something, I feel like it's always worth doing it right. And I really love putting in that attention to detail. One of my team members was like, I was making this fine tuning something the other day on a product that we were delivering to a client. And they're like, why are you taking? No one's going to focus on that. No one's going to pay attention to that little piece. And I'm like, I did. I will.
yeah.
And if one person sees that, then we have to make sure it's great.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it stems from being half Japanese and my Japanese side, but I feel like if you're going to do anything in life, don't do it halfway. Like this is your one life. So if you just choose to do everything just halfway or three quarters of the way, like why even do it at all?
Right? 100%
Yeah.
agree. You
Hmm.
you got to spend some time in Europe. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
I
w-
did.
h- how did that it kind of influence your current approach to wine and winemaking?
That's a good question. So I spent 3 years living in Bordeaux and working at a couple different wineries and pursuing a master's degree there, as well as having the opportunity to work in Italy. And what I can appreciate is the intergenerational success they've had throughout the centuries, really, for winemaking families. And I think there's something to be learned for Napa as a younger wine region, and as we are getting in to the multi-generational phase of ownership and leadership, taking a look at what is done in Europe and how they've been successful. So I think that was really informative for me. I think also from a farming perspective, that was my first exposure to biodynamic farming, which is something that we've then applied to our vineyard here, and just
Mm,
learning about the value of having older vines and the quality that it can bring, and how to farm to be and have that success of having old vines on your property. So there was a lot to be. I mean, I learned a ton. There's way more than that than I learned, but I think those are some of my key, takeaways.
that's awesome. Yeah, I love the fact that anything living in Asia, I see a lot more of those family traditions, like businesses that have just been around through like many generations. And it's really cool to see the care that goes into it. And, because there's this identity that comes with it. I mean, I love, the idea of like, you're young, you can go out and choose a career of your own. Great, that's awesome. But like, there's something about being brought up in this tradition that's really beautiful at times. And you're working, you get to work side by side with your mom in the winery. How does that, like, what's that like for you?
It's really special. I think, it's different than having a normal boss, because it's your boss that's also your parent.
Yeah,
But I think, it's so unique than any other type of business, because you both share the same end goal and vision. And so, and you're personally invested in it, right? So you want it to be the success, particularly
yeah,
because, our name's on the bottle. But aside
right.
from that, I think being able to share, have my mom with me to be able to learn from her, and for her to share those experience and knowledge and know-how and be able to pass that onwards is so special for me. And then we're very close, because my dad passed away 30 years ago, and I'm an only child. So I think generally mother-daughter relationships to have the tendency to be a little bit more tighter knit like that in that kind of situation. So it's great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'll ask something a little bit about yourself, because I mean, I can ask about your family and your family's winery for days,
Yeah.
but like, what wine do you love?
I I have a pretty like ADHD spectrum of wines that I like to
Oh,
drink.
welcome to the club.
I Yeah, you know I definitely have an affinity towards European wines, and then the classics. And having spent a lot of time in Bordeaux, I have a personal soft spot for Bordeaux wines. I love Burgundy. I love Italian wines, like wines from Piemonte, from Sicily, from Tuscany. Of course, classic Californian wines. There's a lot to be admired and appreciated from California wines as well, but from not only from Napa, but Sonoma and Santa Barbara, Santa Rita Hills. So I took my first trip to Oregon wine country actually last summer, and it was incredible. Like, just the experiences we had and the people that we met was really inspiring to me, because they have such the space and opportunity, and the stakes aren't as high as they are in Napa, because land, it's not as expensive to buy land and do business. So being able to really see what people have done creatively is really truly inspiring for me. And so I think I just love discovering and connecting with other producers. I think having pre like conceived notions of a certain wine, I think, is only a detriment to your growth. So I always try to taste as much as possible at any opportunity I can.
I love that. We are, my wife and I are working on helping our daughter develop and grow and have a love for music. And so,
Mm-mm.
I pushed her to play piano. I not like a tiger dad, but I have been like, you gotta stick with it. It's one of the
Yeah.
things that I wish my mom and dad had have stuck with kept my ADD, uh,
Uh,
sent your childhood more on
yeah.
an instrument, because I
Mhm.
love my mom, but she let me start like 15 different instruments. So people go, "What can you play?" I'm like, "I can play the guitar, French horn, trumpet, violin, piano, and none of them well." Like, and so, but one of the things too, like as we're helping her learn about music, we're just like, she's like, "How can I really begin to understand music?" We're like, "Listen to a lot." Like, try to listen to a little bit of everything, and we'll try to. Last summer, not yeah, 2 summers ago, um, she was off for the summer, and I was like, "Well, what are we gonna do? This my child is sitting here 24/7." And so we started this music appreciation class where I put together a list of like 150 great songs and styles, and we started listening to all this stuff. And it was really great because by doing and listening to a lot of things, you start to be able to go, I like this and I don't like this." You know, when someone is just getting into wine, because there's a lot of people that we want more people to get into wine.
Mhm.
Where do you think that they should start?
I mean, I think they should start with all the classics of the world. But I mean, I could start anywhere. I think first is just trying as many different wines as you can and identify, what kind of wines that you like. And just know that there's even within like a certain variety or varietal of wine or like a wine from a certain region, they're not all going to taste like that. So I've heard, time and time again, people say like, "Oh, I don't like Chardonnay because it's too buttery." It's like, okay, well, that's one style of Chardonnay, but you should really try, a more, let's say a stainless steel, fermented and aged Chardonnay, or something another stuff that uses more, used oak, and just try different kinds, and you may discover actually you do like Chardonnay, you just don't like, a really rich style like a Rumbauer. That's not for everyone. So I always encourage people like not to like feel bad about what they or be shamed or into thinking they have to drink like one type of wine because they were told by someone that that's what they should be drinking. I think everyone's pathway is different. So even if it's like a, funky natty wine, if that's getting people to drink wine, I think it's important that it exists in the wine sphere. So I
Uh,
think, you just got to try, like, don't give up. If you like taste a wine, you don't like it, don't give up on the region, don't give up on the grape. Like, just keep trying different wines until you find what you like.
I love that. There is something for everyone, and that's one of the beautiful things with wine is like you might, you know, try things and go, "Hey, you know what?" And the cool thing I try to tell people is you don't have to be like everyone else. Like you can like
No.
whatever you like, and eh, I tend to find that I am not a huge cab person. I like cabs, but I love Pinot, and and like I feel like ashamed being from Napa and saying, "No, I'm not the biggest cab person," But
Yeah.
I have great cabs, and I think that's just the thing. You have to find what you like yourself, and just be
Mhm.
okay with that.
Yeah, it is important.
Yeah. Now, even with all your training and experience, what's one part of winemaking that still keeps you humble?
Every year. Yeah, that's every season is very different. We've been really fortunate. The last three vintages have been quite steady and not dramatic, but we've also had some really, really dramatic years. And I feel like I everyone of course has an ego, but I think I feel like I'm so constantly humbled both in vineyard and winery. It constantly gets, knocked back down. And just when I feel like I have a handle on something like a lot or part of the vineyard I think is more challenging, I get a handle on it, then there's like something else that pops up and you're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
okay, well now I really don't know. I feel like I don't know anything." Or like a wine I write off and I'm like, "Oh, I really don't really love this wine. And then like 6 months later, I'll taste it. I'm like, actually, yeah. It's like, comes around and changes my mind. So that's just like working with a living thing. Like my other passion is horses, and I, have a horse that I train and ride, and having horses is also a very similar, humbling experience, because they can't talk. So it's like constantly figuring out how to like get them to do what you want. And then one moment you think you have it figured out, and like another issue comes up. So I think I just like live in a masochistic world, both professionally and personally.
That's actually awesome. Um, what type of horse? I know it's off topic, but what type of a horse do you have?
I have a Dutch warm blood, so I do dressage. I do the sport of dressage, which is also really masochistic and technical, and it's a very silly sport, but I love it, and I love the partnership it creates with your horse. So I continue to do it.
That's awesome. I love horses. I grew up around horses as well. We
Oh, nice.
when I was first we lived in the Midwest, not the Midwest, but we lived up in like Idaho for a long time, and there was so many beautiful horses up there, and like we
Yeah,
were lots of rodeos, and American Quarter Horse Association had some really beautiful horses up there.
yeah.
But when I was a little kid, I had an uncle. Um, my uncle was really rich, and he just didn't. He because he was a he was a doctor, and when he was a radiologist, and he lived in this small town in North Carolina. And he went to the hospital. He's like, "Hey, there's this new technology. It's called a CAT scan. We should have this for the hospital."
Oh, wow.
And the hospital's like, we don't have the budget for right now. It's a small, local, rural area. He's like, "All right, I'm going to buy the CAT scan, and then I'll just keep it at the hospital. Anyone who wants to use it pays me." They're like, "Okay." And he did that with an MRI, and he started building all these imaging centers. And so anyone within 100 miles who needed any type of like advanced imaging was paying him directly. And so it's smart, super smart. And so he then wanted to get into the world of Arabian horses, and he had to set up an entire
Uh,
horse farm. We had like 20 Arabian horses. It was wild,
yeah.
and we would go to
That's
all of the.
that's where all the money drained into.
Oh, sure. It was a lot of money, man. It was a lot
Uh-huh.
of money,
Yeah.
and but it was beautiful and fun. I mean, and just being able to walk through just walking through the barns, and the smell, and just the personalities of the horses. But one of the things that I found with horses is that people do not understand the variety and personalities of a horse.
Oh my
And
God. Yeah.
right? And like
Mhm.
you might have one horse that is like, "Hi, I love
Mm.
you. We are best friends." And there's another horse that's like, "Bitch, please. You need to
Yeah.
back up." you know?
Yeah. That's like gelding versus mares for sure.
Right?
Yeah.
right? Oh
Yeah.
man, mares are fun. And
Yeah.
but one of the things too is like, with horse personalities, there's a lot going on. Are there like personalities and varietals that when you're making wine, one of those wines is like a "Hey, I'm your best friend," and the other wine is like a "Bitch, please," you know?
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. How much time do you have?
Let's
Yeah.
dive in.
I mean, every variety of grape is very different. Even with the same variety, you have clonal differences that can show, and then you have like combinationally with like rootstock, and so I mean, there's so many elements. So really,
Yeah.
like within our vineyard, right, we have 18 different blocks, and there's Cabernet Sauvignon, there's Cabernet Franc, and Petit Verdot. And then
Mm.
now, I've been just finished my ninth vintage here. And so, kind of starting to get a handle on all the different personalities. But the ones that, yeah, get really reductive, and you just know they're just going to go there like immediately before they even go into barrel. And then Cabernet Franc I would say, is definitely like more the bitch please of the group, because it can manifest itself in all kinds of ways. It can have moments where it's like super green and like smells like jalapenos. You're like, well, what happened? It did not taste like this on the vine. And then it'll just like 6 months later, it'll just be gone. And other times it's just like right out of the gate, just like very voluptuous and like show very opulent and show gives a lot, is super generous, and just like you just don't know, you have an idea, but every vintage it behaves differently, and every block that we have has a very different personality. So yeah, I would safe to say every year, every vintage, every block has its own unique personality it likes to express.
That's awesome. Well, as wine is changing, and one of the things that the wine industry has to do is to try to figure out how to get into the newer, younger generations, because
Yeah.
baby boomers were a big core part of the wine strategy for the wine industry for a long time, and now Gen X, millennials are stepping into that consumer role, and Gen Z, but for these people that are starting to come in, and how can wine reach some of these other generations more?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the $1 million question, right? I think we are seeing more and more younger customers signing up for our allocation list, and more interest. They're not the same level and consistency of buyers like the baby boomers were, but it's all about like engagement with them. And I think, we have the internet. Everyone can go online and do a deep dive on any product, from a shampoo to a bottle of wine to, the restaurant that you go to. So I think what a lot of younger consumers look for is that a way they can connect to the product. And like going back to earlier, in the beginning, what you were saying about stories and how there's so many stories in Napa Valley. I think stories are really, genuine way for people to connect to a wine. And I think that spans across generations. And also, like, I think the younger consumer also demand more transparency and
Yeah,
authenticity in what you do. And so, I don't think they buy into like, this is like a triple 100-point wine and like, only super limited and you can only buy, a couple of bottles at a time. I don't think they really care about that. They care more about, how is it farmed? Like how do you treat your employees? Like
yeah,
what is like your sustainability practice? Those kinds of things. Is it like ethically made? I think those are really important questions for the consumer. And then like even more things come into play with these newer brands. Like there was like a clean wine trend for a while. So there was one brand that was like purporting themselves to be like clean wine, and then like and they just said like, oh, there's like hundreds of ingredients that you can put into a wine. You don't have to put it on the label, and like people like freaked out about that. And it's like, okay, but like most small, wineries, it's as clean as you can get. It's about as
yeah.
close to natural wine as you can get. Like we don't filter, we don't use additives in our wine. It's really this like natural, a very natural product. So I think, the goal for the younger generation now, for us, like coming up in the business and working to connect with more young consumers, is really showing, that transparency and talking about it. And then also just like communicating, educating people about wine in a way that is not as intimidating.
Right.
And yeah, I think people get really freaked out and they like get a wine list that's like 20, 50 pages of wine. They're like, I don't know. It's like, it's okay. Like there should be like a YouTube, like like how to, like, it's okay to talk to the sommelier. Like that's literally what they're there to do, is like help you make the right wine choice based off wines you like to drink. And there's like no shame in doing that. I love doing that. Like I love going to a restaurant and asking the wine director or som there, what's drinking well from your cellar, because like they know their cellar the best. They bought all those wines. They've tasted most of them. So they know what vintage is drinking well and what time, and they can really break things down in a palatable way that's easy to understand for the consumer. So there needs to be like more education around that kind of interaction, and in the importance of having sommeliers and wine directors in these restaurants and that's like to facilitate that. So
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot to do still, and I feel like a lot of time, in a lot of ways, Napa Valley is a classic wine region, and I think if we were to like completely remarket ourselves, I think it would be inauthentic. And I think you just need to help educate the younger consumer about wine as like an enhancement for your meal, and it's a social product and you drink it with friends because it's a bottle
Yeah.
and you can bring people together, and like that's how we need to market it. And then when they're ready to drink more of the classics, then they'll come to Napa.
Yeah. I whenever I try to think about I think you just have to be authentically you and
Yeah.
not try to put on pretense because I always like there was this one Steve Buscemi like role where he was like, "Hey, I'm a young hip guy," and he was like
Yeah.
50, and he was like trying to look like he was in high school, was wearing the hat in a
Yeah.
certain way, and like I just always think about that when companies are trying to like, "We're cool, look at
Yeah.
us," but like just be you. But I think that the educational part's great. I growing up in St. Helena when I was in high school and college, there was a video store that's long gone. It was like a video rental
I remember
shop.
the video. Yeah. In
You
St.
remember the
Helena?
one? Yeah,
Yeah, I
right
remember the
next.
video.
Yeah, it was a. I can't remember the name right now, but it was right next to the bike shop.
It's right next to the bike shop. Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't,
and
I'm
you,
blanking on the name too, but yeah, I used
yeah,
to go and get like
right.
VHS.
VHS, right? You don't remember that. And I
Yeah.
remember walking in there and like my family, like when I was a kid, my dad didn't let us watch anything. Like we were like, it was nature videos all the time. And so when I wanted to go in there and I was just learning about good movies, and that guy that would sit there, it was the guy that owned the shop, would sit behind the
Yeah.
counter. And he would just like, the dude watched everything. He was, and I was like, "Hey, what have you got that's kind of this vibe? And I've watched this, this, and this. I like these." And he'd be like, "All right, let me pull out one from over here." And he'd get you something. And it was always spot on. Like he had great taste in movies he was able to educate me. And I felt like it was not as intimidating because there was someone who just was sharing their passion. And I think that's one of the most important things is helping people. Because when people are getting into wine, there's the wine, there's the score, this has this score, all the jargon, and people are just like, okay, that's great. And even like our definition for flavors and how to enjoy and taste wine, people can go,
Yeah.
is all of that as important? Or, do people just need to get in and meet it where they're at?
Yeah. I think, it's just making it less intimidating is so
Yeah.
important for the younger consumer. And I think there's a lot of I don't know if like Napa is the right region to target on it, but I feel
Right.
like there's a lot of other areas of the world or like a lot of different kinds of wine that can help bring that consumer in. And then
Yeah.
it's like the stepping stone, and then they will like discover about Napa, and then they can roll
Huh.
into Napa Valley and taste a bunch of wines.
Now, when you think about the future, what's one thing you hope people will say about your wine that you're making in, 20, 10, 20, 30 years?
That they still like it?
Yeah,
No,
that's right.
that's a good question. I think we really prided ourselves on being in a state that is truly authentic
Nice.
and making wines that are true to a place. We would be considered like a monopole in a way if you were to put it in the context of wines of the world, because our wines have always been made from this place, this vineyard. And no one else has ever made wine from the site. So it's really, one of one. So my hope is that I can continue that legacy that my parents started. And then in 20, 30 years, if people can still feel that strong connection to and loyalty to the wines and really say, like, these are really truly like unique wines that are authentically Dalla Valle, then I feel like my job has been a success.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. If you could go back in time and give your younger self some advice, whether that be, I mean, I'm asking in the context of wine, but if you want to go off the rails and talk about whatever, then go for it.
Yeah.
But like, if you can go back in time and give your younger self some advice, what would it be?
Um, to take your time, that to not rush. I think once I probably, about midway through college, I started thinking about re-entering into to coming back to Napa and working for the family business because I'm an only child, and I think separating myself from growing up in Napa Valley made me realize the uniqueness of what we had.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to at least, like, I felt like I owed it to myself and to my family to at least explore the different options. And then, once I chose winemaking, I was like, as fast as I could get back to school and study and like work, work, work. And I just really put my head down and had like an incredible amount of drive to get there. Almost to like in a very masochistic way. But I think, and it was like stressful because I feel like I'm 25 and like I'm not where I'm supposed to be. And I'm just like, I need to like get there. And like now looking at, I mean, I'm almost 40 now, and I'm like, oh, you had so much time. Like you were well within the bounds of like where you needed to be. And I think to just like be able to appreciate the moment and just like take your time and not always
Yeah.
constantly be looking forward for the next thing and just be more present. That's what I would tell my younger self.
That's one of the things that I think wine is so powerful for is just that present moment. It's not every day that you get to taste a wine from 1945.
No.
And, in that moment, I think that you let things fall away and you focus on that present moment. I living in Southeast Asia, ride motorcycles all the time. And one of the things that's special about a motorcycle and riding it is you have to be very present. And you just smell the taste as you're driving, and the smell, like the food that's being cooked as you're going through. And it's just like, you get this experience, poof, and then it's gone. And I think that living in that present moment is so powerful and so important.
It is. It is. And I think in this like digital age and, having a computer basically attached to you at all times,
Right.
you really lose sense of that ability to be present.
I 100% agree. If people want to find out more about you and your family's vineyards, where should they look?
They can go to our website, dallavalleyvineyards.com. And that you'll find more information there. We have an Instagram that's very not well taken care of because I do the social media for it. So we have one at Dalla Valle Vineyards. I have my personal Instagram as my DV, where I share probably more about, what we do in the vineyards and the winery. And those would be the best places to learn more about us.